The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
Karras of The Third Man theme, one of my favorite films of all time. And I always bring up his name because, you know, I'm a showbiz guy and I like to give credit to those people in show business. And he did such a marvelous job composing the score for that film, The Third Man. By the way, I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly. And it's a special Assange Countdown to Freedom again. Today we are exploring the persecution of Daniel Hale, a whistleblower that is facing life in prison in a couple of days, a couple of weeks. His situation is fluid. His situation has changed. And we are going to use this show to expose the kind of conditions legally and physically that Julian Assange would face in the United States. We have two great guests, the preeminent whistleblower attorney, Drake Radack, and the former NSA senior official, Thomas Drake, both of them recipients of the prestigious Sam Adams Award. Both whistleblowers are on this show. And so this is like our 60th Assange Countdown to Freedom, our 60th. And it's low cost, high yield. But, you know, I'm asking you folks out there, we give you the product because we are dedicated. We just look to cover our costs. I urge you to go to AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com. That's AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com and make a donation, a small donation, just so we can maintain the website and maintain the programming as we go through this long battle ahead. We would like to do it, but you know, we are at a deficit every week. No one makes a salary here, but there are costs. So Assange Countdown to Freedom. If you like the show, then make a donation, a small one. We don't care, $1, $10, whatever it is. Just so we can pay the basic costs. All right, so that's it. I'm not going to bore you with any more tedious announcements. We're going to go right into this with the great attorney, my dear friend, Drake Radack, who's been at Assange's side for 10 years. She was there from the very beginning. And we'll be right back with her and with this music from Barry Maguire, The Eve of Destruction. See you in a minute.
The Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war, but what's that gun you're toting? And even the Jordan River has bodies floating, but you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Don't you understand what I'm trying to say? Can't you feel the fears I'm feeling today? If the button is pushed, there's no running away. There'll be no one to save with the world in a grave. Take a look around you, boy. It's bound to scare you, boy. And you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
I'm Randy Credico live on the fly here on 99.5 FM in New York City, WBAI. Stream us at WBAI.org. Support us at give2WBAI.org. All right, as promised, we have Jesslyn Radack joining us right now. Now, Jesslyn, a few weeks back, co-hosted a show focusing on whistleblowers, Reality Winner and Daniel Hale. And so there are new developments that have transpired since that date. And she is here to give us an update. Jesslyn is the preeminent attorney for whistleblowers. She's the main person at Expose Facts with what's called Whistleblower and Source Protection Program, WHISPER. And Jesslyn, thank you for joining us and giving us an update today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we go into the new developments, for those who don't know, now Daniel Hale is one of those that have kind of slipped past the radar. I mean, we know about Julian, we know about your clients like Ed Snowden and your clients like Thomas Drake and John Kiriakou, but for some reason, Hale has kind of like, been not part of the mainstream conversation when it comes to whistleblowers. Can you give us a little backdrop before we get into the new developments on Hale's?
Yeah, well, the reason you haven't heard much about it was because he had been investigated and search warrants executed on his house back around 2014, but then there was zero activity. There was no activity in the case for almost 7 years. And then he got indicted recently. So that's why for a long time you didn't hear about it. But Daniel is basically, he is an Air Force veteran who was involved in the Joint Special Operations Command. And he was accused of leaking information that formed the basis of the drone papers expose done by The Intercept and alluded to in films like Citizen4. So his disclosures were incredibly significant, but unfortunately, he has been charged under the Espionage Act, 5 counts of the Espionage Act, and recently pled guilty to 1 count, but has yet to be sentenced.
So he exposed, the nefarious nature of drone strikes, way back. He's been out of the Air Force for years, and they waited this long to actually indict him.
Yes, he raised questions basically about the accuracy of drone strikes and about the targeting procedures and about, the fact that we were engaging in drone activity in countries that were not actually at war with. But yes, his case was there was nothing going on. In fact, me and the other attorney who had been on it at the time, they had not officially dropped it, but they didn't seem to be going forward with it. That other attorney had since moved firms. So it was a surprise that they brought this. And what happened was, under Donald Trump's administration, they decided to dust off a bunch of older cases that had not been pursued, and that includes Julian Assange, that includes Daniel Hale. So a number of these cases that earlier justice departments had decided not to go forward on because it would create bad precedent. Trump reinvigorated them, and now Biden has inherited them and seems to be continuing that path.
Are you surprised that Biden is continuing, or Trump rekindled it, but that Biden is going forward with it when we have a new Justice Department that is supposed to be a little more transparent?
I'm disappointed that these are going forward under Biden. I mean, he didn't campaign on the same kind of "I am the second coming of truth and transparency" incarnate. He didn't campaign on that the way Obama did. So there's not the same level of hypocrisy. But yes, it's difficult for someone who's committed to the rule of law and to fighting, the criminality that took place under the Trump administration to keep pursuing these cases. I'm disappointed. I can't say I'm completely surprised because I feel like our country has been moving, unfortunately, in a direction that's increasingly beholden to the national security and intelligence establishments.
Well, you know a lot of these whistleblowers, and so he was in a position. He knew what was happening. What drove him to come forward? It was a matter of conscience, the way I look at it. What is your assessment?
Absolutely. He's one of the most principled people I've ever met. He's a very caring and feeling person. And yes, like so many people in the drone program, he had a total crisis of conscience about the fact that 90% of the people being killed were not intended targets. So we're talking bystanders, we're talking civilians. Other whistleblowers from the drone program have all just been traumatized by the moral injury of taking part in this program that not only was unaccountable, but actually lied about and misrepresented where we were killing people and how many were being killed and how many of those were not targets.
Well, let me ask you, why didn't he just go up the ladder and like talk to his superior, and go through those channels? What deterred him from doing that rather than speaking out publicly?
Well, first of all, there are really not that many internal channels for national security and intelligence whistleblowers, which is kind of strange because they're the ones who've made all the major revelations within the past decade. But the internal channels are within your own agency. So you would basically be complaining to your supervisor and their boss and to inspector generals who have notoriously turned on whistleblowers. And for better or for worse, right now, the press has been the most viable way to get your disclosures out in the public ether for people to be able to intelligently discuss and debate, and for there to be a transparent conversation about some of the darkest secrets in US history, like torture and secret surveillance and war crimes, and in this case, drones.
So he made that decision, and then 6 years later, he's charged, and he pleads guilty. He pleads guilty to, I don't know, one charge, and there's a reason why. And tell us the reason why someone in his position would plead guilty to a charge of espionage.
The Espionage Act is a World War I law from 1917, and it's a strict liability law, meaning it only matters. The only question is whether you made a disclosure or not. Your intent does not matter. They're not allowed to hear about your intent. So it doesn't matter if you make a disclosure for fame or profit or revenge, or if you make one because the government is lying about crimes it's committing and human rights violations it's committing. It doesn't matter. None of that can be discussed until the sentencing phase, at which point you've already been found guilty.
Right. So, I mean, you know, he has no shot. Is he in the Eastern District of Virginia as well?
Yes, he's in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is the most conservative court in the country and the place where all of these Espionage Act cases, I would say 95% of them have been tried there because they're just, they're just such a draconian, conservative, pro-government district. I mean, it's in the backyard of the Pentagon.
It's basically suicide to try to go up against them. So you try to get the best deal possible.
Exactly.
So now he was set for sentencing, I believe, next month after pleading guilty. But now let's get to the new developments. He's in jail now. So and I only know that by reading you on Twitter, following you on Twitter. I was totally astounded because it's not in the mainstream press. So give us a little overview of what's happening now and how he got into this situation.
You know, and we're still trying to figure that out. All of the attorneys were shocked. His sentencing wasn't until July 13th, but he was called in for a meeting with his probation officer and they arrested him. Supposedly, again, we don't know. It's been very, very unclear about what's going on, but for violating a term of his probation. But I know that he has gone out of his way to abide by those terms. And then, you know, we got information that it was really because of his mental health. And I don't contest that obviously being an Espionage Act defendant has a deleterious effect on one's mental health. Daniel himself has been very open about his anxiety and depression and PTSD from being in that government program. But the fact that they would put someone in prison because they're worried about their mental health defies credulity. I mean, I don't know anyone whose mental health has ever been improved by going to prison. And I know for a fact that Daniel is very distressed right now.
Well, I can understand why. When I'm looking at the Assange, you've been a supporter. In fact, 5 years ago, you did this show and Julian Assange said, get Jocelyn. And we did. And you've been on it all this time. And prior to that, you have been. So when Assange looks at what's happening to Daniel Hale and putting him in this horrible, prison, cell, there must be some definite concerns by Assange and his legal staff.
I think it actually strengthens Assange's argument that he should not be extradited because the prison system in the US is tantamount to torture. And people are put in solitary confinement for long periods of time. And if they have any kind of underlying psychological issues going on, the prison system is notoriously terrible with dealing with that. In fact, the last person who was in that prison system, the jail where Daniel is, was Chelsea Manning, and she attempted suicide. So Assange, I think this strengthens his position on the, I know that the government is appealing, the US government is appealing the favorable extradition decision he had received. But to me, this strengthens his argument on why he absolutely should not be brought over here.
What can people do at this point? I mean, I can do a show on it, but what can people do to support Daniel Hale at this juncture in time?
Right now, it's so new and everything is happening so fast. We're trying to put together information. There will be a website link. I think it's standwithdaniel.org. But I have to look. I mean, again, all of this has happened in the last couple of days, so everyone's scrambling to try to get their ducks in a row. But he has a lot of people out there. He has a lot of friends who care very deeply about him. If you go to standwithdanielhale.org, there will be information forthcoming about how to write to him, how to support him. We just need a little bit more information. Like right now, he doesn't even have an inmate number yet because they're still doing the in-processing.
Okay, we're going to stay on top of this story, and as it unfolds, we hope to have you back to keep us apprised of what is happening to Daniel Hale. I want to thank you for joining us today, and thank you for all of the work. I mean, a person with your education could have made zillions of dollars as a corporate lawyer, but somehow you decided to defend whistleblowers, and that is a huge credit to you. And what drove you in this direction, Jocelyn?
I was a whistleblower when I worked at the Justice Department, and I ended up being placed under criminal investigation and put on the terrorist no-fly list and referred to the bars in which I'm licensed because I blew the whistle. And so that inspired me. I said, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to representing whistleblowers because I know the Herculean, just the David versus Goliath struggle that they're in and going up against the US government.
Well, we're going to talk to one of the people that you saved, from the jaws of prison, and that's Thomas Drake in just a moment. Thank you for all of the work that you've done. You've done God's work, and I'm an atheist or an agnostic, but I say if there's a God, you're doing God's work. Thank you, Drake Radack, and we'll talk to you soon to get an update on Mr. Hale's case.
Likewise, you're doing great work. Thank you both. Bye-bye.
Dvorak and Humoresque. I'm Randy Credico live on the fly here on 99.5 FM, WBAI.org here in New York City, Free Speech Radio. And we just spoke to Drake Radack about the Daniel Hale case. And she was on a couple of weeks ago, as we discussed. We were trying to get Thomas Drake on that day, but he was tied up, and we unfortunately did not have that opportunity. But he's joining us now. Thomas Drake is a decorated U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force veteran and a former senior official at the United States National Security Agency, the NSA. He's a whistleblower, a hero, man I respect and admire deeply. And Tom, thank you for joining us today to weigh in on the situation with Daniel Hale.
No, thanks for having me, Randy.
So, but Jesslyn was telling us that that you actually conversed with him, broke bread with him or whatever, way back in 2014 when Hale was first, I don't know if he was charged or investigated, but she said you, way back then, you became friendly with him. Tell us what that was all about.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's about 7 years ago now. Similar, I mean, just represented me as well for, whistleblower advocacy, outreach, as well as legal advice, given what I faced. And so she started representing Daniel Hale. As a result, it was right after he got raided, by the FBI, and she knew that there was a very small universe of people that would know exactly what he was going through, and I was one of them. And remember, I had former military background; I could identify directly with his service. So, and he worked in the similar types of intelligence that I did, although it was more focused on, he was an intelligence analyst, and it was focused on supporting the drone warfare, overseas, that had been ramped. It started under Bush, but ramped up under Obama. So I first met him shortly after he was unceremoniously raided, which was approximately 7 years after I had been unceremoniously raided by the FBI.
When you approached him, I guess you approached him, was he aware of the dire consequences that he was facing?
I think he knew, just based on what was in the warrant and what they asked for. It was pretty clear. This comes out in the National Bird Doc in particular. He was one of the principals. There were several whistleblowers that were interviewed as part of the National Bird documentary by Sonia Kennebeck. And it was clear because from the actual raid, what they were, what he was going to deal with. And of course, he was facing dire consequences, similar to what happened to me. I mean, your life is turned inside, up and around and backwards. I mean, it's just completely tossed up, and everything that you stood for, everything you that was kind of normal in your life is no longer normal.
You blew the whistle on corruption at the NSA, and I mean, here you are, a decorated veteran of both the Air Force and the Navy, and you were faced with consequences if you had gone forward. What drove you to go forward?
Well, it's really, you're exercising moral agency. You have that choice, as did Daniel Hale. He exercised moral agency. He saw something that was wrong. He saw that the targeting was not as targeted as the government was claiming, and upwards of 90% of the actual kills were not the intended target. That there was, as they used like to say euphemistically, there was a lot of collateral damage, meaning a whole lot of civilians and innocents were killed by drone attacks.
What did you learn in these conversations with him about his motivation? What do you think drove him? Was the moral
motivation is because he was eyewitness to very dark history on the part of the U.S. empire, and of course they were getting away with a whole lot of things. I mean, this is essentially rises to the level of a war crime or war crimes, but it's all done in secret. It's done by secret teams. It's done by a combination of both the military and the CIA, some cases under special covers and cutouts, and you're talking about faraway places and out of sight, out of mind, and they deserve it anyways. You get into this whole dynamic, and of course, it's not just him exercising moral agency, but it's also the moral injury of what he was witness to. Just like me, I mean, there are things that happen to you as a result of being exposed to this that actually creates other trauma, like post-traumatic stress, etc. He had allegedly gone to the press. I mean, this is all in the earlier paperwork in terms of the warrant. Remember, I was served with a warrant, but just like he was not arrested at that time. He certainly was now given a gigantic notice that he not only was a target, but a lot worse could happen to him.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why didn't he go to the higher ups and go through the channels? I know this is a rhetorical question.
Well, I certainly did, but all the channels, the channels are actually controlled by the very instruments of power. And as I have said this publicly many, many times, although I exercised every whistleblowing channel, what they call disclosure channels that existed within the government, under all the laws, statutes, et cetera, and policies that existed at that time, including going to Congress, including going to the Department of Defense, including earlier going up through my own chain of command at NSA, which involved the General Counsel's office and the Inspector General's office. Those are all exposure channels in the end, because you're actually calling out, high crimes, to say it this way, high crimes and misdemeanors, in my case, up to and including the president. Well, it turns out, even with what Daniel allegedly disclosed ultimately to the press, that also involved high crimes and misdemeanors being committed by the president, and his appointees, as well as the military. I mean, it's quote unquote authorizing orders. I mean, he had his Tuesday sessions in which he was determining who was going to be killed next.
So look,
this is what some have referred to as the assassination complex by drone.
So he sees this, he's aware of it, he's participating in it, and he gets to the point where he feels guilty about it, and he tries to go through the channels. But so that's what drives him into trying to clandestinely go public. Is that it?
Right, by going to the press, right? But I can tell you, going to the press, as happened to me, you're touching the third rail. I mean, that's like, especially post 9/11, especially under Obama. And now remember, Daniel Hale's case now, it's not just Obama. That's when he was raided, came under investigation, targeted, was raided. But then, he was indicted 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, by the Trump administration.
Right. And now he I'll probably get to this. He was facing trial under the Biden administration. Of course, Biden was vice president under Obama. So you're talking about a it's transition from Obama through Trump to Biden. So, all right. So he's charged under the Espionage Act. Is it because these people are faithful to the law, or do they have something to hide that they don't want to get out?
Well, I've always said that when you're charged on the Espionage Act, which is one of the worst things you can be charged with, I mean, short of treason, it's this side of treason, because the Espionage Act was never designed to go after truth tellers or whistleblowers. It was never designed to go after Americans going to the press for non-spy activities. I mean, you got to go back to the origins of the Espionage Act. So it's inversely the punishment, in this case, the use of the criminal code under the Espionage Act, the statute, is inversely proportional to, quote unquote, the secret or the alleged secret or secrets you disclose to the press. And that has been happening since Obama.
Well, wait a second. When you look at the Espionage Act, the genesis of the Espionage Act was really not for some kind of, some kind of ethical reason. That's not.
No, actually, it was World War One. You're talking about the president at the time who really was ticked off, right? Very ticked off about anybody that was dissenting against the war. The Espionage Act was actually one of the remaining. There was like an Alien Sedition Act. It was the one thing that continued after World War One, but it was never used to go after Americans for non-spy activities. The actual Espionage Act, the Alien Sedition Acts, actually were used to go after others. Okay, but the Espionage Act, as it was constituted in 1917, updated in 1950, the first person charged under the Espionage Act of 1917, updated in 1950, for non-spy activities was Daniel Ellsberg.
He was the first one. That was in the early
first
70s.
one. I was the second whistleblower. There were actually two others, but they were not related to foreign intelligence per se in the traditional sense of the word. One was Morrison, but that was he sold some secrets, quote unquote, to Jane's Defense Weekly in the UK. The other one was the APAC case, about 15 years ago. That was all politicized.
Do you think it's time to repeal the Espionage Act?
Well, there's been a number of calls to do that because remember, the way it's worded is if you share national defense information with someone unauthorized to receive it, you're in violation. And it actually makes no distinction. I mean, this has been a discretionary thing on the part of the Department of Justice and the U.S. government. Is up until, well, recently, Ellsberg was sort of broke the mold. It wasn't used in any sense to go after people like myself or Hale or Reality Winner or any other whistleblowers, truth tellers, or lamplighters, as some call them. So this is actually more of a more modern contemporary. That's why Ellsberg realized that what happened with him was such a breach. And you know, that's 50 years ago.
Well, yes, we're talking.
He just turned 90. I mean, so Hale is just in a long line. Ironically enough, Hale's actually related to Nathaniel Hale, who's actually, you know, one of my heroes in terms of a figure in U.S. history who was a spy doing intelligence analysis, got caught by the British, and guess what? You know, he only had one life to give, so he gave his life. So there is a historical link here in terms of, you know, the Hale family.
Wow. We are talking with Thomas Drake, a whistleblower, former NSA senior official, and a decorated Navy and Air Force veteran. So I look at the Espionage Act. When it came down on you, you must, after all the service you've done for this country, I mean, you gave up years of your decades of your life in support of this country. How did you feel when you got pinched?
Well, yeah, pinch is one way to say it. I mean, that's a bit of an understatement. I mean, I knew that there was a possibility because of the Ellsberg case. I do post 9/11. You know, the investigation with me began under Bush, but they didn't actually go forward. There was a draft indictment, but they never actually issued it. So it was Obama that actually indicted me, and I was facing 35 years in prison. I mean, look, I mean, the government alleged that I had violated, you know, the national security, right? You know, I was violating the Espionage Act, but what I was doing was gravely damaging the national security of the United States. That's the same argument they made in terms of how they ultimately in 2019 charged Daniel Hale. So once you're charged on the Espionage Act, this is a strict liability law. You have no public interest defense. In fact, there is no defense. You can make your case in terms of reducing sentence or mitigating factors, or, you know, have witnesses and family and friends weigh in about your character, but that's not until sentencing.
So wait a second. You're telling me that during the trial, you can't use that. You can't use that defense.
Nope. I mean, I couldn't, even pre-trial. Man, I was headed to trial, then I pled out, similar to what happened to Hale recently, where he actually pled out to one of the charges. No, there's no public interest defense. Now, the judge does have significant sway. And in my case, the government tried to eliminate as admissible or relevant anything related to the First Amendment, anything related to whistleblowing, and anything related to the classification system.
So
because
I'm saying you're looking at people that are prosecuting you, people that never served, you know, served their country, were not in the Army, Air Force, Marines, or Navy, any of it, and they're the ones that are going after someone that committed.
See, it's national security. National defense information doesn't even have to be classified. That was part of the problem I faced. I had none of the information in the end. Both sides agreed it was not classified. That is not the case in what was allegedly disclosed by Hale, that in part that he pled to here just a few weeks ago. But it doesn't mean it didn't matter even in my case. It's the fact that I went to the press. It was considered a criminal act by the government, and they automatically assumed that I was leaking national defense information, period, for the purpose of disclosure.
Wow. So it definitely upset your life. And back, let me ask you a question. Looking back, would you have done it again?
Yes, but similar to, you know, Ellsberg himself, which he had gone to the press sooner. But people don't realize that even in Ellsberg case, although they didn't have the same formal disclosure channels that exist today, a lot of that was because of all the scandals that was put into place, you know, after, you had the Church Pike Committee hearings, you had the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, all the other scandals, the Bella Abzug, right? There was the Rockefeller Commission. A lot of this stuff came out. And so a whole lot of reforms are put into place. So there were these formal whistleblowing channels. I mean, 1978 is when the Inspector General, sort of the protection for whistleblowers, was sort of first put into place, right? And then things got, updated. And I actually blew the whistle with outside of NSA through official channels, under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act. There's also a military. At the time, Daniel Hale went to the press. He was actually a contractor. He had left the military and went on to become a contractor. Similar to what happened, with Snowden, as well as reality. But it doesn't matter. You go to the press, you're a criminal. And in fact, in my case, if it's any precedent, they tried to say that the actual reporter of record in my case was the only eyewitness to a crime, meaning they were essentially an accomplice.
So I'm looking at Snowden. You mentioned Snowden. Snowden decided, and he's already said this, that he decided that there's no way he was going to go through the official channels because of what happened to you. Did he do the right thing?
Well, some say he should have stayed in the U.S. and faced the music, but it's pretty clear what would have happened. He would have been remanded to prison pre-trial, and then thrown in the, no doubt ended up in federal prison for umpteen decades because of what he ended up revealing to the press. I mean, he had to escape. I understand why. I mean, some people were surprised that I remained. Remember, they thought I was a flight risk. It's really important. People don't realize how far the government was willing to go. I mean, this is similar to what happened just recently to Daniel Hale. He's now in a county jail in Alexandria because apparently the government wants to protect himself against him for possible harm, meaning suicidal ideation. I'm well aware the government, in my case, after I was indicted, they were spreading rumors based on claims of speaking with quote unquote former colleagues / friends that I was not in a very good place and I might commit suicide. They were looking for a reason to, like, quote unquote protect me against myself. Look, National Bird makes it clear that Hale obviously had those kind of thoughts. It's not unusual at all. Talk to John Kiriakou. It's not unusual. I am first to acknowledge, staring into the abyss, when you're facing the direst of consequences in terms of the moral agency, which creates moral injury, which creates post-traumatic stress and ongoing stress. I went through all of that. I know what it's like, that 1,000-yard stare that the soldiers spoke about. World War I, even World War II, battle fatigue. They called it battle fatigue in World War II. But the 1,000-yard stare, I know what it's like to look deep into the abyss and have the abyss stare back at you.
Wow. We are talking to Thomas Drake. I'm Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico live on the fly, 99.5 FM here in New York City, WBAI.org. I got to say, he is in a very tough situation right now, Daniel Hale. What can you say about that? The situation that he faces, he is in solitary confinement. And do you worry about him?
I do worry about him. I know a number of people, including whistleblowers, who've ended up in prison. Let's just say prison is not good for your personal health and well-being. There is no one that I know of that went to prison and got out and was healthier for it. It has a direct impact on your life. He hadn't even a chance to get his affairs in order. I mean, he had his beloved cat and friends and colleagues. This is something he actually has that even I didn't have at the time I went through my ordeal. As a signature Espionage Act case under Obama, he's the signature Espionage Act case under Biden. That's the kicker in all this.
Right. We're expecting something different under Biden. This is strictly punitive, and this is to send a message to other potential whistleblowers. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, that's for sure. And once you're caught in the I mean, this is the vice grip of the Department of Justice and the prosecutors. They want to maximally punish you. They're looking for any reason to drop more hammers on you if at all possible. The worst possible place for him right now is to be in a county jail while he's awaiting formal sentencing. Remember, he still technically has not been charged. I mean, he was charged, but he has not been sentenced. So you're in this weird period between a plea like I did and actual sentencing. And he's in a county jail, quote unquote, for his own protection, right? Which is sort of like what? To make the justice system feel better that in case he was to commit suicide. Look, it was well known already. I've had recent conversation with him. The last thing he was thinking about was committing suicide. Look, he's got friends, family, me, myself, his lawyer, and others who were there for him. But now we have extraordinarily limited access as an understatement right now, because he's in a county jail for the next couple of months, which means this is what I predict. They may give him time served, but then he's going to serve whatever time he has to serve, because he did plead guilty to one count of the Espionage Act and admitted to part of having part of a book that was written by a journalist, that was him. He admitted that before the judge as part of his plea agreement when asked. And then he's going to face whatever time he faces in prison, which I believe is going to be at least a few years, hopefully less, and hopefully not more.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean,
what's the implications here in the Julian Assange case? When you take a look at what's happening to Hale and to Schulte in New York City and the MCC, what's the implications there when it comes to Julian Assange's case?
Well, that's a separate. I mean, Julian Assange is not a whistleblower; he's a publisher.
No,
he's a foreign publisher that we're actually trying to the U.S. trying to extradite so they can actually apply the Constitution to him, because the Constitution does not apply to him as a foreign citizen who is, a citizen of Australia, and he's been remanded to Belmarsh in the UK. I mean, and the reason remember they wanted to the extradite him, and the judge said, "Oh no," based on what he would face when he's in an American prison, and yet was remanded to the British maximum security prison in Southeast London.
Well, that's what wanted to destroy his life. Tom, what? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that what they're doing to Hale right now.
Yes, very similar.
In the judges, the ones that are hearing the appeal in London, must look at this case against Hale right now, and the conditions he's facing. How does that,
it's
with Julian Assange, when they look at that, how does that affect their decision on the appeal?
I don't know if they're looking at that. I don't think the Department of Justice cares. They've appealed. The judge actually turned aside, said you cannot extradite, but he remains in a British prison. So I don't think it really matters, right? I just don't, because she's already weighed in on it. So now the U.S. has appealed the ruling, and there's, then you've got his own criminal defense attorneys, have the opportunity to then object to that, right, through the British court system, and that's all in process right now.
What at the end of the day, Daniel Hale is a hero, and
look, he exercised moral agency to bring in the public interest crucial information about how far the U.S. empire has gone in terms of prosecuting quote unquote war and conflict against others, in this case through drones. And it's pretty clear from all the public revelations, press reporting, books, even by award-winning journalists, by the way, that what we have done rises to the level of a war crime. But guess who's getting punished? Not those committing the war crimes or those who authorized or approved it, up to and including the President of the United States, but the person who blew the whistle on it.
So I assume that you agree that what he did is an heroic act.
It's a heroic act. It's in the spirit of Nathan Hale, who was ironically enough a spy during the U.S. American Revolutionary War against the British. I mean, it's just the ironies of history here are incredibly rich, but not rich in its positive sense, rich in a very negative sense. And so he's paying an extraordinarily high price. Remember, 5 years from the time he was raided to the time he was indicted. For me, it was 2.5 years. Although I was I was targeted by the government as early as 2006. He clearly was targeted before 2014, as early as 2013. But 5 years wondering if he would end up getting indicted. And sure enough, it took the Trump administration to indict him. And then here he is, facing trial under the Biden administration.
Wow. Well, I guess it transcends administrations. We've been talking to Thomas Drake, a heroic whistleblower and a good friend to this show. I want to thank you for affording us all of this time. We got to get you back on soon in terms of the Hale case. We're going to be on top of that and to bring you back on to comment, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. I mean, Hale's not alone. I mean, it's just that right now it's extreme. It's just made things way worse having him remanded to a county prison before he's even sentenced. He didn't have a chance to say goodbye to friends. Doesn't have a chance to put his personal affairs and life in order to transition, knowing that he pled out. I mean, that's kind of the worst aspect of this. That clearly he wasn't expecting to end up in prison or in a county jail prior to sentencing. But, they're doing this for quote unquote his own good, apparently.
Well, we're going to bring you back.
I just can tell it's not, but this is where, well, just like me, they were afraid that I was going to do something that would harm myself. And so the government actually was spreading rumors, right? But in this case, because he did plead out to a charge under the Espionage Act, they have decided that it was in his best interest, quote unquote, the justice system saying his best interest, to have him under lock and key for the duration until formal sentencing. Yeah. It's just not a good place to be.
It's beyond Kafkaesque.
Yes,
it really is. Listen, I've got to go here.
Sure.
Tomorrow is the anniversary. Sunday, the 9th of May is the anniversary of the birth of John Brown. So we're going to go out here with a little Pete Seeger and his version of John Brown's Body. We'll see you Wednesday, folks, here on 99.5 FM in New York City, WBAI.org. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. But his soul goes marching on. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down on the grave of old John Brown. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on. He captured Harper's Ferry with his 19 men so true. He frightened old Virginia till she trembled through and through. They hanged him for a traitor, they themselves the traitor crew. His soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord. He's gone to be a soldier in the army of the Lord, but his soul goes marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath is stored. He's loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah.